Okay, everyone, we might get started. So thank you, everybody who is joining us today in the webinar. Today I want to talk to you about paperless onboarding, obviously. So there are a few things that I would like to go through with you. First things first, I just want to go through a couple of quick housekeeping rules. So we will, when we are going through the webinar, you can ask any questions that you'd like. There is a questions field in the actual platform, so I won't be able to answer them in real time as we're going through the actual webinar, because we've got a lot to get through, and I'm planning to only take about 20 minutes to half an hour of your time, but at the end I will go through everyone's questions and do my best to get through to everyone and answer all the questions that you may ask. I will also be recording this webinar, so I'll distribute this to everybody who's attended today, and so if you want to pass that on to anyone as well, then please feel free to. So to get started, what I'm going to talk to you about today is firstly, what is paperless onboarding? So I want to make sure that we are all on the same page as to what we're actually talking about with onboarding, how we can make it paperless and what the benefits are. So we'll go really high level on the benefits that I'm going to talk to you about today, and then we'll actually go in and explore each of those. We'll talk about what paperless onboarding doesn't solve. So this isn't a cure-all for everything, but it does do a lot of things. So I want to be clear on what it does do and what it doesn't do. We'll also then talk about the difficult task of managing managers. And then I'm going to give you a really high-level demo of Employment Hero's paperless onboarding platform. So to introduce myself, my name's James Keane, and I'm a business development manager for Employment Hero. So we are an HR and payroll software business. So let's get started. So what I first want to talk to you about is, let's look at the onboarding process for onboarding a new employee. So you'd all be pretty familiar with this. So we recruit for a new role, we interview employees, we negotiate their offer, we collect all of their payroll details, and then we start to do all of their cultural and induction and start training the employee. Now, in a traditional business where there is no paperless onboarding system in place, you recruit for a new role, you select an employee, you give them their offer, they accept the offer, and hooray, and then that's it. You don't hear from them for another 4 weeks while they're serving their notice. They then turn up to work on their first day. You give them a pile of paper, they fill out all of their paper details, they fill out their bank details and their tax deck and their super choice form and all those other things that you need. That's then passed on to a payroll person. The payroll person will then manually transpose that into a payroll system, and the rest goes from there. So what we are trying to achieve through a paperless onboarding platform is to move that traditional first day of work a step to the right. So you can see how that works, so that all of that administration and paperwork that is traditionally being done when an employee starts a new role is now moving to before they actually start in the new role. And I'd actually argue that first day of work can actually move a step further, or start to move a step further to the right. We'll actually talk about that in a bit more detail shortly. So just to cover off on the areas that we're going to touch on today. So these are the main benefits that we're going to talk about of a paperless onboarding platform. So I'm going to go into all of these in a lot more detail. They're all incredibly important. Some things I'll spend more time on than others. So let's get started. First things first, I want to talk to you about digital archiving. So I want you first to close your eyes and picture all of the paperwork that you have in your office relating to employees in the business. So this can be everything from employees' payroll details, to their contracts, to their certifications, to their performance reviews, to any procedures that you have for them, to all the other documentation that you need, and any files that you store in their employee files. I want you to then picture your filing cabinets that you store all of this information in. And then I want you to picture throwing that all out the window. So that's what we are essentially trying to achieve with digital archiving of employee files. So there are a huge amount of benefits to being able to digitally archive. So there are some obvious benefits. There is more space in your office. You can actually access all of the documents easily. Going green, obviously, it's a good benefit, so it's much better for the environment. Also, from a compliance perspective, it's really, really important. And I'm going to actually talk about this in a bit more detail from a compliance point of view down the track, because Fair Work is really starting to crack down on organisations for the way that they manage their employees and the way that they manage the compliance for their employees. So digital archiving is a really, really important method, and also to make, it's not least of which is importance is just for the ease of being able to access this information and being able to control any versions that you have and be able to provide employees access to that information as well, because a huge amount of time in a typical HR and payroll person's role is actually spent handling queries from an employee about what my leave balance is, or why this showed up on my pay slip, or how I want to change my address, or all of these sorts of things. So having a paperless onboarding environment as part of a wider employee self-service platform is a huge and immediate time saver. So cloud-based. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this. Most people should already be familiar with the cloud and how it all works. It's been talked about to death. Cloud technology as a term was actually a marketing term. It was coined back in 2010. But cloud technology as actual technology has been around since the late 80s and early 90s. So this isn't new technology. Anytime when you first set up your first email address, whenever it was in the 90s or potentially 80s, that was using a cloud to store all the data. So there is no new technology here. The benefits of cloud technology are well versed. So again, I'm not going to touch on these in a great amount of detail. The ability to be able to access the platform from anywhere. It's constantly updated, so you're not stuck in different versions, and much easier to control than other server-based platforms are just a few of the benefits. If anybody has any further questions about cloud technology, then I'm happy to address them after this webinar. So I want to spend a bit of time on this. So faster administration. So revisiting this model allows us to discuss in a lot of detail how a paperless onboarding plan can actually speed up an employee's induction. So as we mentioned before, traditionally a new employee would show up on their first day, be given a stack of paperwork, spend the majority of the first day or the majority of their first few days actually filling all this out and then passing it to payroll, who then goes in and does their own manual entry. You as a business are paying employees for all of this. So you're paying employees for their first few days and they're not actually doing anything. They're just filling out the forms that you need in order to get them paid. So now that platforms like Employment Hero exist that have paperless onboarding, it means that employees can provide all of that information before they start working. So as we talked about before, we're moving that traditional first day of work a step forward to that modern first day of work. So what this means is that employees, when they actually start on their first day, instead of focusing on admin and paperwork, they can actually focus on assimilating into the company culture. They're not digging through and trying to find their tax file number or trying to find what super fund they're part of or anything like that. Managers can get notifications when their new hires have completed each task, providing a lot of transparency on the next steps from both the employee and the manager. So the point is that from an employer's perspective, setting up a new employee can be a matter of a few clicks. And I'm going to go through that in a little bit more detail shortly. Next benefit is to streamline workflows. So when you have employees who are part of different teams or different locations, there are often, and probably should be, different types of induction and onboarding that they should be doing. Now, this is typically an HR person or a recruitment person or potentially a payroll person who's set this up, which is great. But the problem with that is that as soon as that person leaves or they go on holiday, then that whole process goes out the door with them. So with these paperless onboarding platforms and these cloud-based onboarding platforms, you can create as many of these set and forget rules as you want, so that when you select a particular team for an employee, automatically a whole bunch of workflows and procedures trigger automatically behind the scenes in the platform, allowing employees to go through their own specific onboarding process dependent on where they are working in the business. So some examples of this, we've got a client who's in childcare, for example, and so they have, most of their staff have contact with children, therefore they need a working with children check. So they actually set a rule in the platform that says anytime we onboard someone who has contact with children, automatically as part of their onboarding process, they have to put in a working with children check. There are expiry dates in there which will trigger reminder emails. You can report on it. And so from a compliance point of view, they're completely covered if anybody comes in and does an audit of their files, which they do quite often. So there are many different things that you can do. You can set in really basic workflows. Like you can just say something simple. Like anytime I onboard someone in the head office location, I want an email to go to the office manager the day before they begin to set up their computer and desk. I also want an email to go to IT to get them set up on our systems. I want an email to go to whoever else you want to set them up on whatever platforms or do anything they need to do. You can also have notifications going to employees. So you could have a notification going to the employee the day after they start to tell them to go to HR, to go to work health safety briefing, or whatever it is that you want. So again, the purpose of this is you set up all of these rules and these workflows in a system. They are then there no matter who comes and goes, and they're automatically applying. So it's making the role of the employer much, much easier and making sure that compliance is taken care of. Speaking of compliance, I want to talk to you about compliance and security. So security and compliance should always go hand in hand. So when we are talking about these two, we're talking about protecting your employees, and we're also talking about protecting the business. So when we are talking about protecting the employees and the business at, side by side, we're typically talking about policies and procedures and induction content. So as hopefully you all know, all businesses must provide employees with documents like the FERC information statement and national employment standards, as well as all of their own policies and procedures. If there are any breaches of those policies and procedures, so for example, if you have a code of conduct, let's say an employee is terminated from the business and then they actually come back and sue you for wrongful termination. Unless you have a clear acknowledgement of your policies which the employee has breached, then you are liable to be taken to court on these issues. And it happens all too often. And a business isn't necessarily going out intentionally to be non-compliant, but it's all too easy to be non-compliant. With a platform which does this for you, it takes that out of your hands. So with a paperless onboarding platform, you can build in all of your policies and procedures and induction content into the platform. You can have it mandatory that employees actually have to sign off on these policies, and then you're covered against any breaches against those policies. Also, if you get audited by anybody, by Fair Work, for example, you can show a clear acknowledgement for all of those policies. You can show when they were submitted to the employees. You can show your version control for when different versions were given to different employees, and you are covered against anything like that. So the point is that reducing your liability around these basic compliance issues can be done really simply and really easily with these sorts of platforms. So with Employment Hero, for example, our business is also an employment law firm. So we have built-in policies and procedures and induction content and employment contracts that are all there for anybody to use, that are kept up to date with any changes in legislation. So simple things like this will go a long way to actually helping you avoid any compliance issues and help you avoid having any of the very public problems that people like 7-Eleven and Baker's Delight and many, many others have had, because it's an easy trap to fall into. So this is something that I want to be really clear on. So this can all be hosted in the platform, delivered to employees immediately, instead of giving them a stack of paper where your policies are hidden amongst them, which you can't actually prove that they've read and agreed to. So next thing I want to talk to you about is a single source of truth. Now, this is something which is sometimes overlooked by businesses, but it's really, really important. So what I mean by a single source of truth is if you are in a situation where you have a lot of paper-based files, you might have some employee details stored in your filing cabinets, you might have employee details stored on your payroll system, you might have employee details stored on a share drive, you might have them in emails somewhere. And so when you actually need to go in and check some employee details, or if you are going through an audit or anything like that, and you need to pull out the most relevant details for your employees, there's 5 different places it can be. And so you don't have that single source of truth, that one place where all of your documents will be, and you know that they are correct and up to date. So in the same way that an accounting system is your source of truth for how your business is performing and your bottom line, an HR platform with paperless onboarding built in becomes that single source of truth for all of your people management within a business. So what this means is when employees need to change their details, there is one place that they go. They're logging into their HR platform. They're changing their details on there. That's syncing through to a payroll platform. There's no email sending. There's no forms being filled out. Same thing with all of your leave requests and your pay slips and all of your HR documents and everything like that is all stored in the one spot. So if you need to have any other particular documents that you store on an employee file or anything like that, they're all going in the same place. So this is really, really important, particularly from a compliance point of view. So I also want to talk to you about engaging new employees, and I sort of hinted to you earlier that I feel that modern first day of work can actually keep going a bit further to the right. So in order for employees to be able to focus on their cultural onboarding, then they need to have a seamless administrative onboarding process to actually get them off on the right foot. So if you think about it, with your new employees that you hire, the first thing that they will actually see about the way that you'd run your business and the way that you conduct your activities will be in the way that you actually onboard them. So there are two different opportunities, or there are two different things that the employee may see. So firstly, they will receive their contracts and happy days, and they serve out their notice, and they come to work on their first day, and then they're given the whole stack of paper that we talked about. They spend their whole time filling it out, going through all of their ATO forms and everything. Or before they start, immediately after they get the offer, they have an electronic contract sent to them, which they sign online. They fill out all of their details online in an easy, clean, and smooth system. And they can have access to all of your induction content before they start. So they're actually getting engaged in the business, thinking about the role, thinking about what they need to do within the organization, all before they start, which is the best time to actually start engaging someone and start culturally onboarding someone. So if you think that cultural onboarding only starts a few weeks after the employee starts, I would challenge you to think again on that. And there is a huge opportunity to bring that forward. And that's when the employee is typically most receptive to all of this sort of stuff because they're most excited about the role, hopefully. So managing managers. This is a really important area to focus on because a lot of times the hardest thing about making any change to any process that you're doing is actually influencing your line managers across the organization. So typically new employees expect to have these sort of processes in place. They expect to sign contracts electronically. They expect to fill in all their details. They expect it to all be in a nice clean platform that they can access. Managers, however, who might have been in the same role for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and have been doing it the same way for that amount of time, are often really hard to be able to actually influence change with. So what's really crucial with this is that you have to be able to specifically show how much time can be saved by a manager, how it's going to make their life easier and better, and how it's going to give them more time to actually focus on their role instead of managing the administrative side of onboarding. So things like being able to automate workflows that we talked about, being able to ensure that notifications are going out when they need to, being able to help managers help themselves is going to be really, really crucial with these sort of systems. And once we're able to justify the amount of time that we can spend and we can show what the process is and what that is compared to what people are doing now, that's when managers start to really come on board with what paperless onboarding systems are trying to achieve. So Employment Hero has lots of processes in place to actually help with change management because it's a really crucial part in these sorts of systems and not something to be overlooked. So we've talked a fair bit about what paperless onboarding systems can do. Let's talk about what they can't do. So a lot of onboarding systems, or most paperless onboarding systems, don't have a recruitment element to them. So finding the right recruits is not something that can be handled through here. So once you've found the right person, then the onboarding starts from there. But in order to find that person, that's still a separate process. Things like an LMS, which is a learning management system, and e-learning. Again, typically these are their own separate systems, particularly if you want a best-in-breed system for any sort of learning or learning management systems. There's a whole bunch of really, really good platforms like that out on the market. I'm happy to recommend any for anyone who's interested. Probably the most important thing here to talk about, though, is your integration limitations. So when you have employees filling out all of their own details in a platform, you need that to go somewhere. And that somewhere is payroll. So where you're going to get the most value out of an HR system is when it's linked to a payroll system. because then otherwise, if it's not linked to a payroll system, then there is still an element of data entry that needs to be involved from pulling the information out of employee and out of a HR system and going into payroll. And also there are things like if you are connected with a payroll system, but the payroll system isn't linked to the ATO to submit their tax file declarations, it's still not a paperless system because you still need to send your tax file details into the tax office. So as an example, Employment Hero is linked with lots of different payroll engines. We also have our own payroll engine, which are all linked to the ATO. So this makes it completely paperless. But when you're looking at an HR system, you need to make sure you're looking at also what it's integrating with and where that data is going to go. So, and I just want to run a quick demonstration of how an onboard can actually work within Employment Hero. So what I want to show you here is what you will be doing as the actual employer. So all we need to do from your point of view, and I'm going to onboard myself here, is put in a few basic details. So I'm putting in a name, an email address, we can put in a start date and a job title. I've got this linked to our own payroll engine, so it's got built-in award interpretation, which we can put here. Otherwise, we can just put in a rate manually. We can put in a probation length, which will trigger the email which will trigger an email to the employee's manager when the employees come out towards the end of their probation. And we can select a manager, which controls flow of approvals within the platform. You can select things like grouping mechanisms, like locations and teams, and that will control all sorts of workflows that we spoke about before. So as far as information that we need, or data entry that we need to put in for a new employee, that's it. So the next stage is then selecting a contract. So again, we've got contracts built into the platform. They're here for anybody to use, but assuming most businesses have their own contracts, we can load those into the platform for you. So the way the contracts work is we have, they're in a template format. So we've got text in blue that we can edit, and is also pre-filling from the previous screen. So you can see it's pulled through the name, the organization, the start date, location, the hourly rate, it's all pulled through. We have optional clauses that we can choose to leave in or take out. We've got free text fields where we can put in anything that we want. You can have drop downs or anything else that you need. So the idea is either use our own, and you're welcome to use them. They're built by the employment law team and kept up to date with any changes in legislation, or we can upload yours into the platform for you as well, and they'd be in that template format. So we pulled through an e-signature down the bottom. So this e-signatures are important because, as we mentioned, everything that we do in both HR and payroll is completely paperless. So these are fully compliant with all the legislation and as binding as a physical signature on a piece of paper. We then have an email which we send to the employee. So you can customize it however you want. Most important thing is the link which is going to populate here, and that's what's going to link the employee through into their platform. So once we've done that, from your point of view as an employer, that's it. We're done. That's a full onboard. So everything else which you would now need in order to get this employee paid, so all of their contact details, their bank details, their super choice form, their tax deck, their work rights, medical disclosure statement, all of their policies and procedures, all of their induction content is all now filled out by the employee, and all of that is then syncing straight through into whatever linked payroll engine that we're using. So, as I hope you've seen, we have paperless onboarding is a huge opportunity for you to streamline the way that you're bringing new hires into the business. And it's such a crucial time for employees to be able to be actually streamlining these areas. So I've shown you a quick sneak of Employment Hero just then and what we can achieve. What I would recommend for all attendees here is to reach out to us and organise a time to actually have a look at the platform in more depth and how it can specifically help your business. As a quick sweetener, if you reach out to us, providing you see a demonstration with us this month, if you decide to go ahead with the HR and onboarding platform, then you will be eligible for a 50% discount on your implementation fee. So just to confirm, so to unlock that 50% discount of your implementation, you have to be registered in this webinar and schedule a demo with us in the month of February. But aside from that, thank you everybody for your time. I hope you found that useful, and I'm now going to spend some time going through any questions that anybody has. So if anybody wants to ask me any questions, then please feel free to ask. We can put them in the questions here. So I have a couple of questions here. So firstly, is the streamline workflows, can that talk about tasks allocated to the employees based on the goals to tasks? So you can set all sorts of tasks for employees, and you can allocate those tasks to whatever employees that you want based on whatever grouping mechanisms that you want. So if you have particular employees who need to go and do particular things, they need to speak to particular people, or there are particular goals they need to achieve in particular areas, you can set all of that up within the platform, and it can all be automated throughout that process. So we also have a question, can employee electronic induction forms be done before they join? How do we know whether they join, and he can do that once they join? So yes, all electronic induction forms can be done before employees join. So employees can do that before they join. You know when the employees have done that because there is a tracking area within the platform that will show you where people are at. And once people have completed their onboarding, then they will be able, then they drop off the tracking mechanism so you can see how people are done. We have another question. Do you still have to lodge a paper form with the ATO? Good question. No, you don't. So the whole point of a paperless onboarding platform is that we take all of those paper forms and put them into an electronic form and host them in a system. So from an employee's point of view, they can fill out a tax declaration online. It can go straight through to a linked payroll engine. And as I mentioned, we're linked with many payroll engines, including our own. Those payroll engines are linked automatically with the ATO. So the employee submits their tax declaration, it goes straight to the payroll system, from the payroll system lodged electronically with the ATO, so there is no paper. In the same way, super choice forms go straight through to the, so super choice forms are done online, go straight through to the payroll platform. Payroll platform is linked through to a clearinghouse, so that is your super is automatically distributed throughout the platform. We also have a question, so with compliance and employees being able to sign documents, what happens if they don't sign a document? Does a notification come through to say they haven't signed? Good question. So with anything that is assigned to an employee, be it a contract or a policy or anything else, or an HR document that needs to be, that has been submitted to an employee that isn't signed or that they don't feel like that they need to, then there are automated reminder emails going to those employees to remind them that they need to go in and do it. We can also report on all of that from an administrator's point of view. So from an admin's point of view, you can see exactly who's done what, who hasn't done what, and if you need to follow up with them as well, then you can do. But again, the reminder emails are automatic in the platform. So the system does a lot of the chasing up and administrative work for you. We have a question, how do I book in for a demo? Good question. So all throughout our website, there are contact us forms and request demo forms. So please feel free to have a look at our website, employmenthero.com, hit request a demo, and one of our team will be in contact with you very shortly after you do that. So please feel free to visit on our website. Another question, so can contracts be signed on a smartphone or is it only on a laptop? Really good question. All of this that we've talked about here can all be done on a smartphone. So employees can sign their contracts on a smartphone, they can fill out all their details on a smartphone, and all of that can then go straight into the platform and straight into payroll as well. I'll leave this open as well for any further questions that come in, but anything else, happy to discuss. And Craig, you've got a question, how much does the system cost? We've got a pricing page on our website. So if you want to go through to our website, please feel free to have a look, and it's got a full pricing page on there with the prices in there. Okay, we have a question about support here, so good question, thank you. So support is all that we have a full support team that's here in our Sydney office. So included with our platform is as much email and phone support as you would need. So there's no additional cost to that. And yes, all based in our Sydney office. We also have a question, are we an Australian-based company? So yes, we are born and bred in Australia. All of our operations are based in Australia, and we work exclusively for Australian employees. So our wider business actually started out in Australia as an employment law firm about 25 years ago and has grown from there. So we're Australian born and bred. Yeah, I have a question here about integration capabilities. So as I mentioned, we're linked with a number of payroll engines. These include Xero, QuickBooks Online, MYOB, KeyPay, and our own payroll engine. So the system is automatically integrated with all of those payroll engines. Okay, everyone, we're just past 2:30 now. So again, thank you to everybody who's reached out to us in the questions. Thank you to everyone who's attended. I hope you found it useful. My contact details are up on screen now. Please feel free to contact me if you have any other questions. But otherwise, thank you again for joining.